tell you about product innovation, you think that we're talking about thousands of SKUs in the end. Next slide, please. And like I said, I'm going to be focusing on product innovation. And any company in the consumer packaged goods space, fast-moving consumer goods, needs to provide reliable products and steady innovations at the speed that the consumer market needs. Now, optimizing this product development flow is especially, it has always been challenging, but it's, let's say, even more challenging today due to a number of things. And there's a lot of uncertainty due to geopolitical tensions, regulation, and climate change, right? And so we buy billions in raw ingredients, for example, or where we manufacture certain products and cross-border sales, a number of things, coming from here. There's also rapidly evolving consumer needs and preferences. We feel they're faster, and the data says that they're faster than ever. But a lot of market fragmentation and a lot of niche play competition, and actually GenAI is creating more AI native companies in the food space as well. And you will see how we are tapping into that trend as well, because you can basically accelerate and amplify any kind of innovation. And then we have a lot of supply chain challenges on the sourcing itself, inflation, regulation, and all the things above in the geopolitical tensions, regulation, and climate change as well, right? So our primary use of data, AI, and GenAI is on two fronts here for product innovation. One, can we predict potential for new product innovations so that we are more targeted, and that will increase sales, increasing the top line, and then can we increase the performance of the R&D projects, because that reduces the time to market. Because we also cut the tail for those R&D projects where we foresee that we're not going to get the outcome, and cut that as soon as we can. So that's essentially the framework of and the business problem and opportunity at the same time for Nestle. Next slide, please. And like I said at the beginning, we feel all these challenges at scale, right? And food systems are under pressure, so it is even more imperative than ever that the R&D organization finds ways to manage all those trade-offs between, obviously, the foods and berries that we sell need to be tasty, need to be nutrition, they need to also be sustainable in all, from all angles that you can look at, and affordable. Remember, we sell in over 185 countries, many of which have food instabilities, right? So it is a goal of this company to provide always affordable food. So that is the statement that we've been making over the years, and the statement that actually drives, from a purpose perspective, everything that we do in AI. Next slide. Okay, so this is a super simplified innovation process. It's actually much longer than this, but it boils down to first identifying insights and trends and opportunities at the end of the day, then imagining what we can do with that. So what are the concepts and the reasons to believe, because there's no reason to believe nobody will buy the product, and then developing actually those products, and sometimes also the process, the manufacturing processes that go with them, especially if the product is brand new or changing the packaging, that might require changes in the production lines. So on the first part, on identify, that's where we look at consumer behaviors, trends, whether those are social, regulation-driven, and possibilities. We're super strong on looking at this, what science and technology can bring, and also new markets, and eventually new categories inside those markets. On the second part, on the imagine, that's where we go into ideation, ideas and concepts, and then we also do all the feasibility checks. And we do this, should we do this? From a science and technology perspective, from a regulatory perspective, from a food safety perspective, and so on. And finally, we go into the development, where we prototype the product, including the packaging, if it's new, we formulate the recipe, we do all the consumer testing, and we do the physical testing to predict, actually not predict, to measure the shelf life of a product. And you can imagine that if a product has an 18-month shelf life, then the physical testing lasts 18 months, right? So it is quite a long process in some cases. When we renovate process, we still go through identify, imagine, and develop, but it's mostly developed. The first two phases are smaller. The next one, please. Now, if we plug GenAI into this, And it's about two things. It's about volume and speed. I put the main driver. There's volume a bit everywhere and speed a bit everywhere, but I put you the main driver in each of the phases. And the first two is about volume. It's about more insights and trends, more concepts and business stability, because we have is a funnel of possibilities to then ideas to then concepts. So the bigger the number at the top, the higher the odds that something interesting ends up being at the bottom of the funnel. Right? So in Identify, we use GenAI to surface behaviors, and we look a lot at social listening, for example, for that. Trend surfacing, where we plug into a lot of trends from science, technology, patents, and other sources of information. And then we cross-reference possibilities. So we can jump into connecting a consumer trend with a scientific possibility for a material, for example, for healthy longevity. So we can do those things. In Imagine, it's again about volume of ideas, volume of concepts, and also accelerating checks. So we can launch campaigns like growth hacking to test ideas. Would our consumers buy that? And we actually do that in something that we call R&D accelerators, where we can go from the lab to the shop in the shortest possible. We do a lot of this validation of ideas, and then for the ones that are more successful with these accelerated checks, then we manufacture them at a small scale in a pilot plant. And finally, develop. It's not so much about volume, but about faster. I mentioned before, 18 months shelf life takes 18 months for test because it's a physical test. We can test in silico and predict part of that and accelerate that. For example, we can stimulate consumers as well. We can simulate parts of taste. Taste and sensory is a very complicated business, but for some parts we can also simulate that with what we call electronic tongues. We can prototype a lot of the things in silico. We can predict trials, especially if a product is similar to other products that we've done before. And not all the trials that we would do, but the ones that we believe will give us the recipe and the product that will be closest to the ideal part. So that is what's the kind of the driving factors that GenAI brings to the Identify, Imagine, and Develop, and the kinds of things we do. And then on the next one, I'm going to show you 5 specific examples. And I'm going to open up for questions. You can find those that we have published on the press. So in Identify, we are doing a lot of science scouting. And you can think our scientists, and we have about 500 of those, generate a lot of state-of-the-art reports. What's out there? What are the right spaces that are left? Where can we play? Where we should tap into partners? Things like that. So that is usually done days, sometimes weeks, actually, depending on the complexity of the state-of-the-art. We can go down to minutes because the scientists can actually tap into a lot of data sources, things like research, getting Elsevier, patent agencies, and we can look what's other, also internal information that we have from trade secrets, knowledge that we acquired over the years in our innovation renovation projects. So we tap into all that information, which is largely unstructured. And then we can create those state-of-the-art reports. Obviously, we can do other things that state-of-the-art, that's the main use case. We're also doing something that might seem like very kind of basic, which is equipping everybody in R&D, actually everybody in the company, with tools like, if you're familiar with that, Microsoft 365 Copilot, that embedded in all the Office tools, so they can get time and headspace back. So we've been doing this for over a year, actually over a year, and fully rolled out since April this year. We're getting about 10,000 hours per week back. It's about a population of 4,000 people. That's self-reported. Time back matters. Headspace in R&D probably matters more than time, because that's where people can focus on identifying and on imagining and on their creativity. So we have high adoption and usage, and we're starting to measure intensity to the relevancy of the use of these kind of tools to empty the agenda of our very highly qualified R&D people. We have 60% plus with PhDs, so they don't have to do meeting minutes and then they draft documents and so on much more quickly. On Imagine, we're using GenAI for concept generation. We're going between 20 to 50% faster, depending on whether it's product innovation, renovation, and also depending on the category. We have categories that are more complex than others. But for example, here you have a real example of a seasonal product. We can do a lot of commercial innovations, many more. And we are now also testing, plugging that into our capacity in the factories. Like good concepts that we can manufacture, and we increase asset utilization as well. On this, by the way, unstructured information and making sense of that, we're using that across operations as well for things like risk assessments and assessing all the contaminants not in real time, but in as close to real time as it gets, versus doing that once or twice per year. So you can see that the volume and the speed play in other places as well. And finally, on develop, this one is not so much about volume, but about speed. So we are discovering new packaging materials and other types of materials. This is a very nice example we worked on with IBM. It usually takes years because you need to identify the polymers, right? A packaging material. It actually protects the food from air and from moisture. Those are the things that degrade food. So we put polymers and paper for our capitalization strategy. So we learn language models for chemistry. We can create monomers with GenAI, and then our experts turn those monomers into polymers, and then we synthesize them and so on. And so something that would take years now takes months. Okay, and then that is something that helps us tremendously in our sustainability commitments. And we are doing similar things also for plant breeding and farming, for regenerative agriculture. All of this in developed is very, very targeted towards sustainability. For now, we are also optimizing processing operations using this type of approaches. But there's are two of the examples that are more mature for us on plant breeding and farming to come up with, in this case, coffee varieties that are higher in yield and they're drought resistant as well. So you have a feel for what we're doing with GenAI and very concrete examples that you can find out there. If you're interested, I can also send you examples of what we've published and share these examples. And we'll leave them on top of the time and open it up for questions. So we can go to the next slide.
Okay, thank you, Carolina. For the ones that have joined a little bit later, just to know, Carolina joined us online, so that it kind of felt surreal, like there was no speaker on the stage, so that you know that too. We have Carolina here with us virtually. So we still have some space for questions. Does anybody want to ask a question? We have someone there, and you'll get a mic so Carolina can actually hear you.
Hi, thank you. My question is mainly on prototyping. So before your first prototype is built, how do you come, and while you are in the ideation phase and conceptualizing, how do you come together as a team to structure, because it's often the problems need to be defined well, and you're looking into abyss and it's a clean state, right? So how do you come together as a team to structure yourself to make that ideation more tangible and just know exactly what to do?
That's a great question. And so we spend, I would say, probably more time on this than actually how to use the tools. Because when we ideate, then we have experts on all the different functions and disciplines that are needed. Like we have nutritionists, we have creative chefs, and especially if it's a category like food, but you need to put the food in a plate. Like snacking, you only eat the snack. But in the category of food, you eat that thing with others on the plate, so you need the chefs. We got people that are specialists in food safety. We got our process experts. So sometimes the teams are like 20-ish people. And so we started testing that in quote-unquote our easier category. Easier, why? Because it's only one ingredient and the rest is process, which is coffee. And so they started streamlining the process. How would they do identification and imagining and concept generation if they were all remote and invented by AI? So they developed a blueprint on how to do this, and when it was more valuable for them to get together and brainstorm like in a whiteboard, and when the technology should come in. And then that blueprint has traveled across the different categories that added their tweaks on the things that were different for those categories. But that is a living blueprint, by the way. And as GenAI can do more things, we keep revisiting that. But that is the number one. In the prior session, we were talking about, how are people upskilled and how do they change, or do we change our ways of working because of this technology? It's a continuum thing. But yeah, and you're absolutely right. When we conceptualize and prototype, we do still need all those different areas of knowledge, and still the teams are there.
Great, thank you. Do we still have any other questions? We have here a gentleman in the